masculine and feminine are sort of opposites in one sense. And then even within this opposition, there's another opposition of fire versus air, water versus earth. So the fire-air axis is kind of like passion versus reason. That's sort of the tension there. Passion, fire, reason, air. And then the water-earth duality axis is sort of like what is practical versus what feels right. Water, the emotions, earth, grounded in reality. Welcome to Promethea Astrology. My name is Aleena, and I am the astrologer for creatives and changemakers with a physics BS from Yale. Today we're talking about gender in astrology. Now, this will not be about men and women and does not have anything to do with genitalia. Gender that is in astrology is more abstract and symbolic than that. So we're going to look at all of the different versions and ways that gender show up in astrology, in the zodiac, in the planets, and in the houses, and sort of break down these core archetypal meanings of these different qualities. This is a part of a series I'm doing on the signs of the zodiac, and before I get into each of the signs, I'm going to break down what the different qualities are that make up the signs. So each zodiac sign has a gender, element, planetary ruler, quadruplicity, which is cardinal, fixed, or mutable, and then the symbol that goes along with it. So I'm going to break down those core elements before I do my deep dive into each of the zodiac signs. From my perspective, when it comes to all of these different qualities, signs, planets, gender, what have you, there is not one that is better than the other, masculine or feminine. They are both just different and have positive and challenging sides to them. They both have their strengths and weaknesses. And rather than think about which is better, I think it's more useful to consider the way that both are necessary. And it's through our understanding of opposites that we're able to contrast and sort of generate. And I really think about these different core archetypal symbols in astrology as like the zeros and ones in computers, where they're these like foundational things, and we just create all of these different combinations, and through that mixing of it all up, we come up with these incredibly complex and fleshed out archetypes. But it all starts, the most foundational, fundamental, symbolic qualities, I think very anciently, is this idea of masculinity and femininity, which in modern times some people also are calling solar or lunar, where masculine is more solar of the sun and feminine is more lunar of the moon. In the past, people may have also sort of considered masculine to be more of the light and feminine to be more of the dark, which is interesting in and of itself. I'm going to start out with gender in the zodiac. So every zodiac sign is either masculine or feminine in this traditional sense. I'm a traditional Hellenistic astrologer, so I'll be using some of those ancient understandings as we go through this. So each of the signs are either masculine or feminine, and the feminine signs are all either water or earth signs, and then the masculine signs are fire and air signs. So to first just abstractly speak to gender, the core essence of this more solar masculine energy is kind of like left-brained thinking, more analytical, breaking things apart, analyzing, more associated with the mind, the intellect, spirit. Also could tend to be a little bit more extroverted, forward motion, driving forward things, and a little bit faster paced. Whereas feminine energy in this astrological sense, archetypally, is more potentially introverted, a little bit slower, oriented towards what is material, earthly, the body, the emotions, healing, kind of the subconscious. It's more like the right brain thinking, where in the left brain we are breaking things apart, analyzing them one after another, kind of like focusing intently. The right brain is more of this kind of like spacey, dreamy, big picture. Like when you look at a work of art, you're not analyzing every single stroke that you see, but rather you step back and you take in the whole image holistically, and that's sort of what the right brain is doing, and that's more of this feminine energy, this kind of softer totality, not breaking into the details and analyzing, but just taking in the information, almost more like an intuitive sense as well. Feminine energy is also more associated with being receptive, supportive, nurturing, whereas the masculine energy is more assertive, pushing outward, forceful in a sense. And I think it's really helpful to kind of make this a little bit more concrete through the elements. So the qualities of the masculine elements, fire and air. So fire is more about drive, passion, energy, almost it could be physical energy or sexual energy, and just this drive to push things forward. And on the shadow side can be a little bit more towards aggression or overly forceful or anger, also inflammation and aggravation. Those are all kind of fiery qualities. And on the more positive side, fire is also associated with bravery and leadership and being courageous, integrity. And then the other masculine element is air. So air is more oriented towards what is intellectual, the mind stuff, what is playful and social, and on the shadow side can be a little bit cold or distant. It's a little bit more dry and cool as an element. So air, the feeling of air from someone could be like not so connected, like maybe you're having fun and being playful and talking about intellectual things, but there's not like a personal felt connection as much. It's the fastest moving element, the lightest. Another shadow side is that it could be a little ungrounded, less stable, easily changing. But on the positive side, that can make air a little bit more adaptable, go with the flow, not too attached. Very mental, very intellectual, the intelligence. And again, this is sort of like the left brain thinking, analyzing intelligence. And then the feminine elements are water and earth. So earth is more oriented towards being stable, grounded. This is the slowest element, the heaviest. Earth is about what is practical, what is here and now, the reality of the world. The physical, tangible stuff can also be associated with food. On the positive side, a little bit more stable, grounded, centered energy. And on the shadow side can be a little bit more rigid or inflexible, potentially a little stubborn. And then water is more emotional, intuitive, healing, fluid. Water is also shapeless, can on the shadow side be a little bit merging. Water struggles with boundaries, very related to empathy, compassion. Water is healing and creative, generative, mystical, spiritual, depth. Water really likes to go deep with things. On the shadow side can also be a little bit volatile. We think of the tides and kind of the waves of emotion that can be up and down. So this can be a struggle sometimes for water as well. One more thing I forgot to mention. The elements are also always opposite to each other in the same way. So just like we're alternating masculine and feminine, water is always opposite to earth and air is always opposite to fire. So this is interesting because this oppositional axis, which is a very difficult aspect, remember the opposition being directly opposed to each other? I think of this as like the Harry Potter wand, where it's like one of us is going to die. The Harry Potter versus Baltimore, like red and blue, just there's no way to resolve this. One of us is going to live and one of us is going to die. However, this is always true between two feminine or two masculine signs. So the oppositions always share the same gender, but are opposite elemental qualities. So even though water and earth are both feminine elements, they're opposite to each other in the zodiac. So it's like there are masculine and feminine are sort of opposites in one sense, and then even within this opposition, there's another opposition of fire versus air, water versus earth. So the fire-air axis is kind of like passion versus reason. That's sort of the tension there. Passion, fire, reason, air. And then the water-earth duality axis is sort of like what is practical versus what feels right. Water, the emotions, earth, grounded in reality. The emotional, watery, intuitive, mystical healing realm is not as interested in reality, which is what earth is based on. But these are still both two different kind of feminine qualities. Earth is also kind of like the structure that holds water. So it can also be kind of like rigidity versus fluidity. And in the fire air opposition, there's also this tension between heat versus coldness, whereas fire is hot and air is cold in this traditional scheme. The kind of rational reason air facility is like this distant, removed, cold kind of feeling. So I'll pull up a zodiac wheel that I made here, which you can download for free on my website if you like. There is so much amazing information in here, so much symbolism that through these videos I'll be starting to unpack. So this can be really nice to download for free, so you can reference that as you start to deepen your astrological learning and memorize some of these things that we're going to go through. So you can see in this wheel, I have the zodiac sign in English and the outer layer here, and then we have the glyph and the symbol on the ring inside of that. Then we have the planetary ruler, the symbol of the planetary ruler. Then the planetary ruler written out in English there. Then the quadruplicity, whether or not things are cardinal, fixed, or mutable. And then the element, water, earth, air, fire, and the masculine or feminine assignment within there on the innermost ring here. So you can see that the masculine and feminine elements just alternate every time. So this means that the feminine signs are all sextiling each other. That's when they are 60 degrees away or 2 signs away, which is a harmonious relationship. In astrology, when zodiac signs share a quality like gender, element, quadruplicity, then that is an aspect, and this means that the signs are able to see each other. The etymology of the word aspect literally means to witness. So they're able to see and sort of understand each other because they share a quality. So sextile is sort of the weakest of the positive aspects, but it's still a positive relationship. And then all of the masculine signs will also be sextile to each other, just every other sign alternating. And we can see in the elements, it just repeats fire, water, air, earth, fire, water, air, earth, fire, water, air, earth. So they are just alternating there as well. Zodiac signs that share the same element are trine to each other, or 4 signs apart. So every 4 signs you'll return back to the same element, and there are 3 of each element. There's cardinal, fixed, and mutable versions of each of the elements. Cardinal air, fixed air, mutable air. Same for all of the elements. And so because they share an element, they're able to witness, to see each other. They have this aspect of the trine, which is the most positive of the aspects. And in Pythagorean numerology, the odd numbers were associated with being masculine, and the even numbers were associated with being feminine. So 0 is kind of like the first feminine number, the void, the nothingness, the darkness, and then 1 was like the light, when there is something, the existence, the thing. For Pythagoras, in his school of numerology that very much became integrated into astrology, the 1s and the odd numbers, the 1 was like the monad, so it's like God, the totality, the oneness of all things, whereas 2 was like the split from that oneness, the fall from God, the illusion of duality, where now there is the other. And then 3 was the combination here, 1 plus 2. So this is the triad, which is the strongest shape in the universe. Pythagoras, obviously a big fan of triangles, and represents the support and stability of combining the masculine and feminine, and is a very good thing. Also an odd number, so it's masculine for him too, which is better in his way of thinking. So that is also part of why the trine in astrology, which if you were to have 3 trines, it would make a triangle. The trine is dividing a circle into 3, 120 degrees. So these trine aspects are the most harmonious, whereas the sextile is dividing the circle into 6, which is an even number, so it's not as good as the odd number, but it is 2 groups of 3. 6 is 3 plus 3, 2 times 3. So it still contains 3 within it, so it's still positive, but it's half as positive because now it's been doubled, it's an even number, and that's sort of how we get the symbolic meaning of these numbers and aspects and angles. And the opposition, when you divide the circle in 2 and have just 2 things on the opposite end of the chart, this is the most difficult aspect, also having to do with 2 being the feminine, the fall from grace, the fall from God, the illusion of duality. So this is going to be the most difficult relationship to reconcile in astrology aspect-wise. And then 4 is also very difficult, still an even number, 2 groups of 2, but not quite as difficult as the opposition. So I'm not going to go through each of the signs and explain how they are masculine and feminine and the way that shows up for them uniquely, but I will do future deep dives on each of the signs individually, so you can look out for that or follow along. Maybe if you are watching this at the time at which I've already made all those videos, you could just go check that out. So that is briefly gender in the zodiac. So the pillars of astrology, and kind of the 4 crucial components and the different kind of the pillars of astrology. There's the houses, the aspects, the signs, and the planets. So this was one piece here. We've gone through gender in the zodiac wheel, and now I'll talk about gender in the planets, because also the planets have gender as well in astrology. So there are only 2 feminine planets. There is the moon and Venus. So when we talk about gender in the zodiac, it's much more kind of abstract and not so grounded in like human women, men ideas of gender. But when it comes to the planets, it is a little bit more human and embodied in that way, because the planets in their most ancient original sense were conceptualized as anthropomorphic gods. So Venus and the moon were these female goddesses of, in the Greek time, Aphrodite. And there were actually 3 moon goddesses in the Greek time. There was Selene, goddess of the full moon, Artemis, goddess of the new moon, and Hecate, the goddess of the waning moon. Although it's interesting, in Babylonian times, there was actually a masculine moon god called Sin. But for more recent times, the past 2,500 years, the moon has been conceptualized as feminine and is oriented towards fertility, healing, creation, nurturing, supporting, all of this kind of mother archetype stuff. That is the moon and the way that the moon is feminine. Also, the moon rules Cancer, which is a water sign, feminine element. So the moon has this very feminine, watery quality of the intuitive, emotional, healing, creative stuff. And then Venus is our goddess of love, beauty, romance, sensuality, sexuality, all of the fine, beautiful, feminine things, pleasure, earthly pleasures. And Venus rules 2 signs, Taurus and Libra. Libra is an air sign. Besides the sun and moon, each of the planets rules a feminine and masculine sign. But the feminine sign that Venus rules is Taurus, which is the earth sign. So we kind of have Venus is a little bit more of the earth feminine, and then the moon is more of the water feminine. So Venus is also associated with money and just kind of the material embodied pleasures. So even though Venus does rule a masculine sign as well, all of the planets, like I said, rule both a masculine and feminine sign, we can also consider the nature of the planet outside of the zodiac. So the zodiac is like, in this ancient sense, the sky world, the different kingdoms that these wandering stars, the planets, would just traverse around. So the zodiac is like the cultural backdrop over which these sky gods traverse and just walk around, go in circles through, backwards and forth sometimes. So we can also consider the gender of the planet on its own. So even though Venus might find herself in a masculine sign, she is still, in her core essence, has this feminine nature. And she can become more masculine when she is accultured, in a sense, when she grows up in a masculine land. Is, for instance, if you had a Aries Venus or something, that'll give your Venus a more masculine bend to her, but still underneath it all, her core essence is this feminine goddess energy. Although she's also very happy in Libra land, where she rules as well. This is the more kind of masculine version of the feminine Venus qualities, when you take her beautiful Venusian things and apply them into social and aesthetic areas. So Libra is going to be more about aesthetic intelligence and social intelligence. So these are still masculine air things, aesthetics and social intelligences. But the feminine piece of that is that Venus is also ruling over peace and relaxation and harmony in these experientially pleasant things. So that's the type of air quality that Libra is going to bring to the world. And then there's 4 masculine planets. We have the Sun, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, all masculine. So Mars and Saturn are our 2 malefics. Mars is like the warrior, very much aggression, anger, action, bravery, all of that. And then Saturn is more punishment, isolation, cold, distant, withholding, scarcity type of stuff. The Sun is like the archetypal king, and then Jupiter is our other benefic, ruling over abundance, good fortune, good luck, also things like God, philosophy, and authority. So in the Greek pantheon, these were all male characters. We have Kronos for Saturn, Zeus for Jupiter, Helios, the sun god, and Ares, the god of war. And again, the sun only is ruling Leo, which is the archetype of the king still, the lion, fixed fire. But all of the other planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, have 2 signs, 2 zodiac signs that they rule over, one of which is masculine and one of which is feminine. So Mars rules over masculine Aries and feminine Scorpio. Aries is the fire Mars and Scorpio is the water Mars. And then we have Saturn ruling over both Capricorn, feminine Earth, cardinal Earth, and then Aquarius, masculine air, fixed air. So remember that even though the planets can rule over a zodiac sign that is a different gender from their own, underneath of it all, you can still imagine them in their core essence as being men or women, masculine or feminine, in this kind of God original context. But as they wander around, they can be accultured or kind of come to embody these other qualities. So they're still going to be bringing their most archetypal essential energy into the opposite gendered sign when they rule over a sign that is a different gender from their own. Jupiter is ruling over Sagittarius, the masculine fire version, mutable fire, and then also Pisces, the water version of Jupiter, mutable water. And then there's one planet that is neither masculine nor feminine. We have the trickster in the planetary scheme of Mercury. Mercury is neither and both. Mercury does not play for the day team or the night team. Mercury is just whatever you need him to be. Mercury can be masculine when Mercury is around masculine planets or in a masculine sign, and Mercury can be feminine when Mercury is around feminine planets and feminine signs. So it's interesting the way that even in this very ancient, multi-thousand-year-old scheme, of course, we still have gods that are neither masculine nor feminine, that defy the gender binary, and that is Mercury. Mercury's masculine sign is Gemini, air Mercury, mutable air. And Mercury's feminine sign is Virgo, mutable earth version of Mercury. And if you want a fuller breakdown of each of these planets, I do have a playlist where I break down every one of those planets in great detail, so you can check that out. Especially for your rising sign, the planetary ruler of your rising sign will be very good to know about, and also the planetary ruler of your sun and moon sign especially will be quite enlightening to find out about, so maybe check that out if you want. So I've already kind of talked about gender in the aspects, where in this Pythagorean numerology that is sort of the basis of some of our aspectual understandings, we have the conjunction is like the one, the monad, the god, the masculine, odd is masculine, two, the opposition, feminine, and then three, the combination of masculine and feminine, four is a feminine, challenging aspect, the square, and then the three was the trine, and two is the opposition, and one is the conjunction. And then six being the feminine again, but it has two groups of three, so it's composed of a masculine, so it's still kind of more positive in there. So I already kind of went through gender in the aspects and in the zodiac and in the planets. So then lastly, we have the houses. And gender is not really showing up as much in the houses, but it's still sort of present there. So I'm going to pull up Chris Brennan's breakdown of the traditional names of the houses and some of their qualities. So this is not my graphic, this is his. So here are the traditional Hellenistic names for each of the houses, or they called them places. And the houses now have to do with the rotation of the earth. So the helm, the first house, is determined by where the eastern horizon is at a given moment in time. So this will change as the Earth rotates, and within 24 hours, the horizon will be pointing back at the same location where it started. So the helm here in the setting, the first house and the seventh house, these are places where in whole sign houses, part of the sign will be usually above the horizon and part of the sign will be below the horizon. The zodiac sign that the ascendant is located in will define the entire first house for whole sign houses, which is what I use as a traditional astrologer. So the part of the chart that is above the ascendant will be above the earth, and the part that is below the ascendant will be below the earth from your subjective experience at that given point in time in that particular place. So symbolically, the sky is like the mind and a little bit more masculine therefore, and then the earth is more like the body and a little bit more feminine therefore. So the helm and the setting place are places where there is both sky and earth, kind of both this masculine and feminine, this totality of the self and then the other. First house is self, seventh house is other. And another way that we see that the first and seventh house are kind of like both masculine and feminine is that we have Mercury here, our planet that is both masculine and feminine. So how about that? When people have a lot constellated in the top half of the chart, this is the more extroverted side of the houses. So we can see here, for instance, the 10th house is career, the 9th house is like institutions, like societal institutions of education, religion, and things like that. The 8th house has to do with other people's money, and then the 11th house is friends, groups, alliances, hopes, and dreams. These are all things that are sort of how you integrate with the world outside of you. And then the bottom half of the house is more kind of personal and introverted stuff. So like the 4th house is parents, 3rd house is siblings, personal finances, personal creative endeavors, personal physical health. So when people have a lot constellated in the bottom half of the chart, this can be people who might be a little bit more introverted because most of themselves is constellated in this more private parts of life. And then when you have a lot constellated on the top half of the chart from houses 7 to 12, this can be people who are a little bit more extroverted because much of who they are is constellated in these places that have to do with the integration of self into the external world. So you could check that out if you want. See how that looks on your chart and if it seems true for you. Another thing that we see in this chart is this house of good spirit versus the house of good fortune. So in traditional astrology, when they talk about spirit, this more has to do with the mind and philosophy and things like that, a little bit more masculine. And then fortune has to do with more material, earthly things, fortunate circumstances when the material world is supporting you. And the house of good fortune is ruled by our feminine benefic, which has to do with earthly pleasures. And then the house of good spirit is ruled by our masculine benefic, Jupiter, which has to do with those more masculine good things, as the two planets that want to do good things for you, but one in a more masculine, heady ethos, philosophy, abundance way, and then the other, the more earthly, felt, embodied pleasure type of way. And the more masculine house of good things is on the top half of the chart, kind of the more extroverted masculine part of the chart, and then the house of good fortune, the more feminine side of things with the feminine benefic, is on the bottom half of the chart. So there's like a little bit of gender showing up there in a way. And then the third kind of house axis where you can see gender showing up is in the 9th house. We have the house of God, and then the 3rd house, the house of the goddess. God ruled by our masculine planet, the sun. Goddess ruled by our feminine planet, the moon. And again, the masculine side of things is on the top half of the chart, and the feminine side of things is on the bottom half of the chart. The 9th house has to do with, like I said, kind of institutionalized things, education, higher education, religion, justice systems can be here as well. Also foreign travel, foreign places, and in traditional times, this was also associated with authority, because political, justice, religious systems were all one type of authority. So, and the sun is the king there as well, which is, the sun has his joy in the 9th house. I think in the other planets that I was talking about in the other houses, I might have said that that planet rules that house. But that is not the case. I misspoke. Those planets have their joy in those houses. So the planets that are listed here, this has to do with the planetary joy scheme, not rulership. Rulership is the zodiac. Joys are the houses. So these are just house placements that these planets really enjoy. They have a great time here. The type of energy or qualities or areas of life that this house represents is sympathetic to, in alignment with the types of qualities and nature that those planets have. So that is why they have their joys in these houses. So the sun, the king, authority, is in this kind of house of authority over big institutional things. And then the moon is ruling over this house of the goddess, which is also the place of divination, siblings, communication, short distance travel, school. So more kind of like intimate community immediately surrounding you types of things. More kind of private, not as big structural, institutional, and things that kind of have to do with earlier in your life as well. So that, I think, is everything that I can think of in this moment to talk about with regards to gender in astrology and the way that it shows up in all of the different pillars of this beautiful system of symbolic thinking. So let me know if you have any questions below, of course. Would love to answer your questions and see what you think about all of this. Also, you can subscribe here. That really helps me if you would like to support my work and just get notified when I have new videos coming out. Know also that I offer astrology consultations. If you would like to get a reading with me, I offer 60 or 90-minute consultations. 90 minutes we will get into the future and looking into the cycles you're in and what is coming up for you in the coming year. 60 minutes is more just a breakdown of who you are, personality, purpose, strengths, and weaknesses. You could also follow me on Instagram at Promethea Astrology over there, Promethea_astrology, same as my handle here. And I really appreciate you being here with me. Thank you so much. Be well.